ready, Pat? I'm calling this meeting to order. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given by posting notice on the door of the school administration offices on the 5th of January, 2021, and notice has continued to be posted by delivering notice to the Retrospector and the Courier Post and filing notice with the clerk of the Borough of Oaklyn. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oaklyn in the County of Camden and is called pursuant to NJSA 18A 10-3 to hold our annual reorganization meeting. I will take roll. Mrs. Riley? Mrs. Valpel? Mrs. Butchko?
Here.
No McMillan. Mr. Taby?
Here.
Mrs. Ezekiel? Mrs. Marmion?
Here.
Mr. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Stotts? Can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will now read the official results of the November 2021 election. Mrs. Denise Buchko, 695 votes. Mrs. Amy Ezekiel, 650 votes. Mrs. Therese Marmion, 668 votes. And Mr. Robert Fink, 459 votes. So can I have Mrs. Buchko, Mrs. Ezekiel, and Mrs. Marmion please stand so we can do the oath of office. Please repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state, under the authority of the people. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of Member of Board of Education, and that I am not disqualified as a voter, nor disqualified due to conviction of a crime, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability. Congratulations. When you get a moment, if you could just sign the oath of office, and I'll collect them at the end of the meeting. I will now ask the superintendent to read the school member code of ethics into the record.
In accordance with New Jersey 18A 12 through 24.1, every board member will abide by the following code of ethics. The board member will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought only through legal and ethical procedures. Make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. Confine his or her board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. Carry out his or her responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with fellow board members ensure they are well run. Recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board. Refuse to surrender his or her independent judgment to special interest or partisan politics or political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or the gain of friends. Hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all matters, she will provide accurate information and, in concert with fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school. Vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer. Support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties, and refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and act on complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. I'm now requesting nominations from the board members for the office of President of the Oaklyn Board of Education.
Bill, are you up for the challenge again this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else up for the challenge? Looks like it's unanimous.
Mr. Stotts, you did accept. I'll take a roll call vote. Mrs. Riley?
Yes?
Mrs. Valpel?
Yes.
Mrs. Butchko?
Yes.
Mr. Tavy? Mrs. Ezekiel? Mrs. Marmion?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
And Mr. Stotts.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Stotts.
Thank you, ma'am.
The meeting is now yours.
Okay, Section 5, the election of the Vice President. Are there nominations for the Vice Presidency?
Todd, you going to do it again? Sure. Todd.
Any other noms? Mr. Schaefer, you accept, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That, hearing no others, we'll have a roll call on that.
Mrs. Riley? Mrs. Valpel?
Yes.
Mrs. Butchko?
Yes.
Mr. Tavy? Mrs. Ezekiel? Mrs. Marmion?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes. Okay, Section 6, public comment. This is our first public comment section. This is an open public meeting and has been so advertised. Did we mention that up front at the end?
Yes, I did, the very
Okay,
beginning.
I'm sorry. This is the first of two sections. This public comment section is for items on the agenda. You'll have another opportunity later in the meeting to discuss anything else that you would like to discuss. We ask you to stand, give us your name and address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less if you can. Anyone? Okay, hearing nothing on the agenda items, we'll go to Section 7, which is resolutions. And these are the proposed meeting dates for this year, for this calendar year. Okay, I'll speak up.
There you go.
All right, is there a motion to approve those meeting dates for the balance of the calendar year?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Are there any questions, complaints, changes to be made? Okay, hearing none. Do we need a roll call on this,
Yes.
Beth Ann?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Riley? Mrs. Valpel?
Yes.
Mrs. Butchko?
Yes.
Mr. Tavy?
Yes.
Mrs. Ezekiel? Mrs. Marmion?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes. Committee appointments. I'm going to discuss committees a little bit. I guess now is as good a time as any, huh? I've got 5 suggestions, and I'm open to any others that anybody thinks of. Number 1, status quo. Don't change anything, just the way we're operating. Number 2 is a committee of the whole at monthly meetings. That has been suggested before and hasn't gone too far, but it's an option. Number 3 is realign the committees. Perhaps we have Finance is one committee, Buildings and Grounds / Curriculum is another committee, and Personnel is a third committee. Number 4 is 3 committees that each review the entire agenda.
What was that last one?
3 committees, as we have right now, but each committee reviews the entire agenda, not just, if you're the curriculum committee, you review the curriculum, but you also see everything else. The thought there is we were elected to the Board of Education to decide all the items on the board. If we're working on committees, we're limited to 1/3 of what we know. If you're on the curriculum committee, you know curriculum, but you don't know the details on the other committees. So the thought there is, while it would be harder for there's a message here somewhere in there. Have to keep watching that little red light. And just lost my place. The 3 committees. It'd be longer for Beth Ann and for Dr. McDowell because they'd have to do the same thing 3 times. But in Oaklyn, it's not going to be more than an hour for all 3 committees to do everything 3 times. I'm reasonably certain. And that way you know what's going on. The other committees are there. You know what's in the other agendas. You don't have to sit back and read the agenda that says committee or chairperson or the superintendent recommends approval. This way you'll know what the details are. You'll have your opportunity to put your thoughts into the process. So that's an option, I think. Actually, I like that option. And then there's a committee of the whole for work sessions, as the borough does. They have a caucus meeting that's advertised as a public meeting, and in fact is a public meeting, where they do all the nitty-gritty arguing back and forth and discussions. And then you have the second meeting, which is the official meeting, and at that point, everything has been discussed. You know what your positions are, and you go through and make your final decision. Remembering, though, that the caucus meeting is in fact a public meeting.
I'd like to go back to suggest going back to the way it used to be, where it was curriculum, technology, personnel, and then finance, facilities, and shared services with somebody rotating. That's my suggestion for number 6. What's the difference between number 4 and the committee of the whole? If everybody's on the same committee and getting the same information, what's the difference?
The difference is the committee meetings are private meetings. They're not public meetings.
No. Okay. Well, then why have? I guess. Okay. It doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to have everybody getting the same thing, why are you having 3 different meetings?
Well, you could have a committee of the whole, but people don't seem to like that because nobody wants to have the argument in public.
Well, no, I understand.
And this gives you the opportunity to have the argument and not do it in public.
I'd also like to
Can I
suggest that
interject?
if you went with the direction of
Can I
the
interject
2
to
committees
answer the
again, after listening at the workshop, less was more is what they were recommending. Not more committees, less committees was the suggestion, because they said it was more efficient. That was the belief. But one of the things they did suggest was that in order to make sure everybody got all the information, was that the chairperson sends notes for each meeting by the Friday after the committee meeting. So that would be my suggestion.
So, Colleen, can I interject really quick in terms of just so that all of the board members are aware? In a committee of the whole, deliberative discussions, personnel discussions, and confidential matters in planning would not be available in a committee of the whole, opposed to if you had the same committee in small group without quorum. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's correct. But you can always go into executive session for the appropriate items. If you have a personnel issue that you want to discuss, you don't do it in public.
Right, that was going to be my concern too, how sometimes there are delicate situations that come up just from the board members, and that we just can't discuss in a committee of the whole, but would we necessarily, how would we get into an executive session if we didn't know about this? And when you start talking about things and things come up, and that's my concern is, again, we're going to be stifled with that committee of the whole situation. even if we go into executive session, like when you're talking and things come up and then all of a sudden somebody goes, I can't go with this anymore because I can't, it's an ethical situation. So that's the problem with the committee of the whole. All the ethical stuff has to be tabled until you get into a situation where you can.
I think the
And it
important
stunts the whole situation. It really does. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I thought you were done. I think the important piece is what we've said the last few months is communication. How they're set up, how they're divided, it's not going to make a difference as long as everybody's getting the information and finding a solution that, I do think that there has been value in having people who have a little bit more background in curriculum, tech, and personnel to weigh in. They may think of things that somebody else doesn't, and then present to everybody and then ask questions is good versus as well as with the finance. Like, I don't know enough, but I want to know what's going on, and I always want to do that. So I think sharing of the information is important. How it's structured, I think, thinking about the concerns of that with the committee of the whole and stuff like that is, I'd be with Christine on that one.
Just noticing that under number 7, it says that the meetings are held at 6 o'clock with a private session. Is that an option?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Because that could be post-committee meeting, and then board members bring questions.
Actually, it depends what you're going to be talking about. Closed session is specific to those items excluded from public comment according to the Open Public Meetings Act. So it would be personnel items where you cannot mention the person's name in public, ongoing negotiations, contract negotiations, anything that's of a deliberative nature that's not ready for public consumption. So if it doesn't meet any of those categories, then we just can't do it at 6 o'clock, because then we're having a board meeting, we're just trying to do it. You know what I mean? So you need to be very clear when you go into closed session, because the closed session minutes do become public at some point. At the point at which the reason that we went into closed session, for example, to protect someone's right to privacy, when that no longer exists, then the minutes become public. So we have to be very careful when you go in to those closed sessions.
I would be concerned of doing something at 6 for a 6:30 meeting as well, because we know that things run over. And the next thing you know, you have people sitting out here waiting till 7:30.
I think I was just responding to the fact that there's not a chance for us to talk as a group about questions, and they're not typically the things that you just talked about that we couldn't discuss. They're typically, we had a committee meeting. It's just a timing thing, because I think I worry about going through the entire agenda with 3 committees. I don't know, it just seems like at times, I don't know if that's the best use of everyone's time, board members and administration.
I agree.
I agree. And talking as a group at 6, even if it's not in closed session, if you're talking at 6, then the board meeting starts at 6. It's a board meeting. So, yeah, so you need to be careful.
So given the alternatives here, the 5 or 6 really suggestions, I am kind of partial to personally the idea of 3 committees but reviewing the entire agenda. I feel that does solve a couple issues. One, with the 3 committees, we're guaranteed that our president is there for each committee discussion. And I think it would be beneficial that if we at least were aware and reviewed the agenda and had a little more discussion on all the items. So that way, when we do open up for committee of the whole, we've been well versed on those specific items. We've received the information we need to, and I think it can give a little more meat and good discussion when we're in committee of the whole. Some of the questions perhaps we would have brought up, not having all that information, we'll have that information by reviewing the entire agenda, might give a little more substance and depth to what we can discuss as committee of a whole. So I know it's going to be a little taxing in terms of time, running through the whole agenda, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. Sticking with the 3 committees solves the issue that our president is always present for each committee discussion, and we become at least well versed and informed of all the items.
If we're doing the 3 committees, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because I'm not sure if I am. If you're doing the 3 committees, everybody's getting reviewed, everybody knows everything, why are you doing the committee of the whole?
Well, I guess just if there were further things that needed discussion or
Okay.
questions we came up with after the
Okay,
fact.
that's why I was asking. I
Um,
just wasn't sure.
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause
perhaps
to
committee
me,
of the whole, right.
It
may not-
seems like we took something that was working and we spread it out, and
Mhm.
we've seen a lot of bumps in the road and it not working. And me personally, I don't think doing exactly the same is the right choice.
Right.
But that's just my opinion. But I fear that the same thing would happen is you're going to have 3 committee meetings where you're all asking the same questions, you're getting the same information, which is good.
Mhm.
But then you're going to rehash it again for an hour at the next meeting.
Well, it may not necessarily have to be
And that's-
rehashed.
right,
Perhaps
but
we
that's-
don't find we need to discuss as much in committee as a whole.
I think that if
Not
we're going to
sure.
have a committee of the whole, like, to me, it seems like we're duplicating things, and we're doing the same thing, and, you know, we're all volunteering, we're all giving our time, and nobody's complaining about the time, that's not the issue, but it is, like, you know, if you were at work, and you're having 3 meetings, and then another meeting to talk about the same thing that you already talked about, you're going to be like, why am I doing this? It's a waste of time. And that's how it looks to me, and I think we have to find a solution that doesn't do that. And I don't know if that is that, or if it's doing the 3, and then maybe there's some sort of process or policy where if are questions, they have to be submitted by Friday. I don't know. I'm just, you know, talking out. And then there's only specific things that are addressed at that, so that it doesn't turn into, you know, the email where this could have been an email. You
And
know.
you can just do, there's committee ones where you don't have committee of the whole.
Well,
That's what I was- that's
I
what
think.
I was
I don't
thinking.
understand
Yeah.
why we added committee of the whole personally. I don't think it's necessary.
When we did that was before we had adopted our current.
Right, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it rehashes the thing. I think if you want to do the 3 committees and have everything doing it, then get rid of the committee of the whole, and then when that committee comes up, if there's questions, you ask questions, because it's the same thing. Otherwise, you're doing the same thing, and you're just repeating. 5 minutes later, you're reading the same stuff.
Can
Well-
I chime in for a sec?
Of course.
I feel like there's value, though, in the committee of the whole in that being public discussion. I know there are things that should not be discussed and are better discussed before the meeting, but I feel like the public elects us to serve on the board, and when they come to a meeting and all they see is the decisions that have already been made, the assumption is they're not doing anything, right? We ask a ton of questions in committees, and I feel like I'm for going back to the 2 committees personally, because I feel like that's a better use of everybody's time. But I think that there are some things that could just be, this is a committee of the whole discussion. We could do this at the meeting. There are other things that need to be discussed in committee. And
Can't they be discussed during the review of that on the agenda anyway?
Yeah, can I chime in a
Well,
second?
And I think that's fine, too.
That's my
Yeah.
point, is I think the committee of the whole and then going over the stuff is repetitive, whereas if you eliminate the committee of the whole, and then when it's curriculum, if you have questions, they get brought up then.
Well, I guess the
still
question
in public,
is, yeah.
and everybody can still see, because the public's not engaging in that conversation even as committee of the whole.
Agreed, but there's some things that come up that are not on the agenda. So then there would have to be a process of adding things to the agenda.
Can you bring them up in
It's,
public?
hold on, can I? It's my understanding that at the end, that before we vote on anything throughout the entire process in the evening, Bill always asks, is anybody? We should bring this up. Because it's more timely, then we're fitting it into the slot where it belongs, and it just doesn't become like a random thought or whatever. And at the end of the agenda, before he adjourns, he says, does anybody have anything else to bring up? So I think we're allowing ourselves, and I agree with you, we're public, elected officials. We need to be on top of what the public says. But I think the committee of the whole was a trial to see if you were going to get rid of the committees, a meeting every, week before. Well, we don't seem to like the committee of the whole as much as we like the committees that are done privately. I think the decision is now we have to make up our minds which one of the committees do we like the breakup, do we like the process, and how are we going to do that? Because I think we're pretty much all in agree the committee of the whole should probably go away. There is enough time, and if there isn't, like again, we can come back and. Well, let's try it, Denise, because I think let's see if there isn't enough time there, and I think you'll find if we get back to the regular committee meetings like they were, so much of that stuff came up at the committee meetings. You know what I mean? It didn't have to be. And what I don't particularly like about the committee of the whole is sometimes you have to wait a whole month to get the answers. Because the stuff comes up, like if it gets brought up at the committee meeting, you got a week and you can come up with your answers. You know, but if it comes up at the committee of the whole, you've got a whole nother month before the public, you or anybody else, finds out what the answers are. And I think sometimes timeliness is important, especially with things that are going on now.
I think that the committee of the whole does the same thing as if we talked during the committee pieces of the agenda.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just
That's what
not saying, all right, let's have a big everything and go through everything. It's more organized, you know, so it still gives you what, you know, you want to bring something up. We all have a question, whether it be you were on that committee or you weren't, or you just have an issue to bring up. There is time dedicated.
It's just for clarification, the committee of the,
Right, we know that, yeah. Right, yeah. Bill, I know that it's important for you to be at each one of these committees, and I understand that if I were in your shoes, I'd understand. But every time we try to break this up into three, we find up with one angle that's really kind of like loose, like personnel's really not going to have a lot to do on a regular basis. I'm wondering, would you be thoughtful to possibly having Todd, don't hit me, about being your person in place in that second committee to be there and take the notes, and then you and he can get together and converse, which I know this is president and vice president, and that way we would have two full committees, and but you would also have someone there that you know is on your behalf, taking the notes, doing what has to be done, and reporting directly back to you with everything that goes on without any editing, without any worry. Would you be okay to that? Or, I mean, I know you want to be there yourself, but this is what's creating the problem with the split of the three committees.
I'm probably the least important person to be at all these committee meetings. What was missing recently was my input, specifically in the financial end. You know, I was not on that committee. I'm okay, I can follow it, I know what's going on, but by the time I get involved, everything's done. And, you know, at that point, I can't say, well, wait a minute, think about this, or did you consider this, or did you consider something else? So that was why we went to three committees. If you do two committees, that's fine. We'll just need a few people to volunteer not to. We're going to fund, speaking of finance, we're going to buy new microphones. I'm of the opinion I was elected by the people to represent them on the Board of Education. Not on the curriculum committee or not on the personnel committee, but on the Board of Education. So I should really know everything that's going on, and it's what I was elected to. So that's the opinion that I have on why. I tried that. Yeah, we're going to talk to these IT people about this. But that's a theory. As I say, we're supposed to be doing everything. We're supposed to be voting on everything. We're supposed to be understanding everything. And when you get something from a committee, pick one, curriculum, personnel, whatever, it comes in and it says the chair recommends this or the superintendent recommends this, and there's not much going on. I mean, you just say yes, and most people don't really know what's going on. I ask questions, as Beth Ann can well testify. I don't know whether everybody does that or not.
You're having the two committees, and whoever the chair is sharing notes with everybody by the end of the week. That gives you the weekend and Monday to review them before the meeting, so that way when it is the curriculum time, I'm just using that as an example, if you have questions, you know to ask them, because it's not been decided. Because again, like you said, these are recommendations. Until we vote, they're not solid. They don't mean anything. You can't make decisions in committee meetings. It's not allowed. That's not the way it works. It doesn't get made until the meeting. So it would give everybody the chance to do that.
Can I just, I'm trying to go back to what were some of the problems. So one is communication between the committees or among the committees when we had two or three. And the other is the role of the chair, which I think could be stronger, and I agree with Colleen, in that questions about committee agenda items should, I believe, go to the chair, obviously copying in the administration of both the board and the school and the district. But I think that there is a way to address what, oftentimes I would feel like, okay, so I'm looking at the agenda, I can see items. I can see that they're talking about this. I don't know what the discussion was. So I'd love to go to the chair and ask those questions and have a back and forth. But that's not often how it happens. It often is one board member copying everybody. And so I'd like to see the role of chair of the committees be strengthened a bit.
Well, that's why I was saying, like, and that was a suggestion at the workshop, was that one of the other districts do is the chair of each committee sends to everyone minutes, basically, of the meeting by Friday night, whatever. So they have time to review it, and then, because some people may not get to reviewing it until Sunday. I mean, people have lives, they're busy, or even Monday, but then they come prepared to the meeting, and that's where, when it's being reviewed, because again, decisions aren't previously made, they can ask questions. And if it's something that maybe needs further discussion, it gets tabled until the next month, and there is time for that, and maybe there is some other meeting or something like that, and go from there. I think communication, like you said, is the big thing, making sure everybody has the information. But I don't think spreading it out and making more times to talk about and hash the same things is the way to make it work. I think less is more. Having it being concise, direct, this is what you're expected, this is what you're to report on, and then everybody engages at the appropriate time. That's just my opinion.
I agree. Colleen.
No, multiple times. To be hashing it out like, okay, you hash it here, then you hash it in committee, and then you're hashing it 3 different places. Hashing is not the right word. Reviewing it 3 times, when you've already discussed it once, and then you've discussed it again, and people aren't, it's not about when people are, have more questions. That I understand. I'm talking about if you're saying the same thing 3 times, it's a waste of time.
Again, my point is, I think, I personally find that it's more informative to me to sit in a meeting, listen to what's being said, have my input, have input from the other people. If I'm getting notes from the chair, I'm not getting all of that.
So there was the thing,
if I
as
want
the
to know what you
president-
discussed at the meeting, at the committee meeting, I can look at this because that's what you use to discuss it. So I can look at that and say, yeah, this is what was discussed. But I want the back and forth. That's why I say I'm elected to do this.
And we're not saying get rid of the back and forth. We're saying have the committee meetings where you have, say, phase 1 of the discussion with the people who are on the committee. They send the notes out with the minutes to everybody. Everybody gets a chance to review it. Then when you get to the point where it says curriculum on the committee, you can have as much further discussion as you want because that's the appropriate place for it. That's the suggestion. The other thing is, as the president, I'm pretty sure you can actually go to each meeting. You just can't vote at each meeting because that's what it said in one of the things. I don't know if you have to check that, but there was something.
No, I did check. I think you brought this up previously. If we have 5 of you, we have quorum.
Okay.
So that's really the.
Yeah.
But we've also, I mean, I know before we rotated skipping a meeting. I mean, most people miss one meeting at some point anyway, that it's, and if you're getting the notes, then you're not going to feel like, okay, even though I missed that meeting, there's something that.
Okay, now I'm not sure if you do that, the committee meets curriculum, since we're picking on them. I was holding the button down. You go to the meeting, and if you have a question, you discuss it there. What's the difference between that and the committee of the whole?
When you're adding the committee of the whole, you're saying, okay, let's do it here. Say the agenda says 6:15, just as an example. You spend an hour going through everything on everything. Then you're coming to the section number 9. It's the curriculum stuff. Now you're saying exactly the same stuff. You're rehashing the same stuff, maybe without the questions. But what you can do is you can have your agenda that says, oh, when we get to number 7, now we can discuss it because it's related to this. It's the same thing, but you're not duplicating the time.
Not sure I understand how we're duplicating the time. The committee of the whole, we come in, committee of the whole is the meeting. It's the board meeting. You come in, you go over the agenda, and you get to item 7. You have
But
your
it's
discussion.
not. That's the thing. Committee of the whole is when we spend an hour discussing everything that's going to be read to us in 5 minutes.
No.
But I don't think that is, though. I don't think that's how we
feel.
use committee of the whole. I think we use committee of the whole to bring up questions that individual board members have.
Why not bring
about
them up
things-
at the appropriate place?
Well, what I'm saying is maybe they can be added to the agenda at some point, but they're not really action items. They're more discussion items,
Right,
right?
but-
So that's a difference.
But why have something on the agenda to discuss? Because again, nothing is decided until after it's discussed. If you can't discuss it at that time.
What I'm saying is when we do committee of the whole, though, it's not like we're going through the entire board agenda.
No, we're not going through
Right.
everything. And I'm not saying
So
that
I'm
we
just
should go
trying
through
to
everything.
make sure that that's
Yeah,
not
no.
misinterpreted.
Might
that
I-
we're
might
not
I
going through
suggest-
every financial committee
I'm trying to hear
discussion.
everybody.
Yeah.
May I suggest, I mean, we have that section, committee of the whole, that if there are items, because I know Denise, you and I worked with this, I guess, at the beginning of the school year. If there's, like, you looked at some policies that looked wonky. You brought them to our attention, and then we worked through it. If you've got a burning issue or something's come up, the agenda goes live 24 hours before the board meeting. But your board meetings are on a Tuesday, so they would go live Monday night. But again, with the weekend, I would suggest if you have something like that, probably Thursday or Friday the week before, to send to the superintendent, Mr. Stotts, and myself, for addition to the agenda item. If Mr. Stott, as the board president, he should choose to put on, if he wants to put it on, then we can add that item. There might be some months that there's really nothing going on, and then we just don't have a committee of the whole discussion. But if it can stay on your agenda, just like the very long resolution each month when you have to go into closed session where I list all the legalese, and at the end it says NA, because we don't need it. I can keep it on the agenda. I can keep it in there every month, and then the months where we don't have anything to discuss, there's just nothing there. But then if somebody has a burning issue, and Mr. Stotts and Dr. McDowell agree that the whole board should talk about it publicly and maybe vet the community and see what they want, then it's added. Then maybe that'll, I don't know, serve both sides of the same.
And that would be for something that would not fit under any other category along
Correct.
the committee.
So like,
That's what I was
right, so
suggesting
like
in the
Denise had,
beginning.
and she was not even, I know she was looking at bylaws, but more specific, it was, excuse me, not policies, bylaws, just like things that we could fix if we just figured it out. So it really wasn't a policy revision so much as just.
This would be a misplaced item that
Right.
didn't fit under any of the other agenda areas. We just
That
said
makes sense.
committee of the
Right, and like
whole.
in the past,
Yeah, okay.
I think 4, 5, 6 months to 2 years, we spent a lot of the committee of the whole comes right after the presentations where the superintendent has given the update on COVID. And that's really been a good use of committee of the whole time where you could ask the questions, the burning questions you're getting from the PTA or the committee members about what we're doing for COVID. So that's an excellent use of the committee of the whole structure. But just to have it is not. So I see everybody's point, so I'm just trying to find a middle ground because I think there's a way to do it, but not just do it for the sake of doing it.
Because I think anytime we have any kind of an action, whether it be a presentation or whatever, there's always a spot where we have questions. So there's no need to make another section where it says committee of the whole. And then if we come up with anything else, then that can be put on again for another time. But like you said, we'll use the committee of the whole for things that are structurally not fitting anywhere else, but are important enough that we need to see them now. That sounds like a good idea.
I piggyback off what Bill said too. I agree. Being able to have that discourse is pretty important. I'd much rather have those discussions face to face than just reading the notes. And to Todd's point earlier, only using the committee of the whole when we need it. So, speaking to expanding the role of the committee chairs, perhaps because we want everybody to be involved in decision making across all the areas, right? But then, maybe committee number 1 brings up something that we hadn't thought of, or committee number 3 does, or whatever the case is. So, in expanding the role of the committee chairs, perhaps it would be then their responsibility, based on the committee feedback, to, all right, this is something to submit for committee of the whole. So we get to that portion of the agenda during the board meeting, there may be nothing. So it's, nothing. Me too, Bill. There's nothing, submitted by the committee chairs this month, so we're going to move on. Whereas if there is something submitted, then we could have those talking points ready to go, and that's something, again, being that the agenda goes out 24 hours in advance, people across the committees will have an opportunity to see what talking points are on there, so they can kind of have an inkling of what the other groups are talking about. So, I mean, with that in mind, I would go for the 3 committees. I know. Sorry, Dr. McDowell and Ms. Coleman, but because I know it's more on you guys, but I do like that idea.
Actually, Rich, it's not,
Yeah.
because I think that if we're gonna focus on making sure that everybody has sufficient information, we can either do it up front or we can do it on the back end. But either way, it still needs to happen.
Mr. Stotts will just need to seat Mrs. Ezekiel onto a committee. Okay? Yes, he was. Thanks.
Educational Services Commission for 1. That's the first one. Okay, we have the Educational Services Commission for 1. I have my finger on the button and it went off. Okay, I'll just shout.
Bill, under 8,
Under 8,
you got 8.02 first before you go to section 9, which is Ed Services Commission.
oh, sorry, I missed that one. New Jersey School Boards, whoever the person is, would you serve again this year?
It's currently Mr. Taby.
Okay, good. And the alternate is?
It was Mr. Fink.
Okay,
You can do it.
It was Chris. Colleen. Yes, it was. Mr. Schaefer.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions on it? Hearing none, on a roll call.
Mrs. Riley? Mrs. Valpel?
Yes.
Mrs. Butchko? Mr. Tavy?
Yes.
Mrs. Ezekiel? Mrs. Marmion?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Stotts?
Yes. Okay, section 11, this is the second public discussion. This is the one where you can discuss anything that you would like, within reason. Same rules though. Please stand, give us your name and address, try and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less if you would.
We had our council reorganization last night. I'm the liaison for the next year. And this is a point of information that Coleman is right. Our attorney keeps us in a very tight reach. And almost all discussions have to be in public. Very rarely go into executive session. So the sunshine law really is very strict.
Can I just ask, is there a mic for people making public comments to use? Okay, thank you.
Oh, you know, I just hate this thing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for hearing me out. My name is Drew Genther Sr. I live at 148 West Park Avenue in Oakland. I do have a couple issues with the school being closed. One, questions, or some of the questions that I have, I know cannot be answered tonight. I will be emailing Dr. McDowell to see if I can get some answers from you. But I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. First of all, I'd like to know who is involved in the discussions of making the decision to close the schools when they're short-staffed. My second one is there an action plan actually in place to keep this from happening again? The third is the CDC recommends 5 days of isolation and then 5 days of mask wearing. Why are we closing the schools when the schools are already, for 2 weeks, when the people are already wearing masks in the schools? How often are we testing the teachers? And it's just going to be an ongoing problem if we test in mass. I'm sure if we test in mass, then we're going to end up with a lot of closures if we don't have an action plan in place. And then my last point of comment is it's reported that we received about $500,000 from the American Rescue Plan, with a portion of that money going to ensure that schools stay open. What has the money been allocated to? I'm not sure who would be able to answer, if it's the BEO, that's the Finance Committee on the BEO that can answer that, or if I should direct everything to Dr. McDowell.
Yeah, send me all of your questions and we'll get you that information.
Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, I'm Jill Chestnut. I live at 43 Kendall Boulevard, Oaklyn. I'm a parent of a special needs child. My son is, I think, the only deaf child in district. I'm a SPAN parent-to-parent advocate. I've rewritten legislation for deaf kids at the state level. I coach Special Olympics. I'm a special ed teacher. None of this is me bragging. It's just to say that I'm passionate about the special ed people in my community. My son happens to be one. But there are multiple text messages, emails going back and forth. Parents are really upset. Our children sat at home last year. Was it last year? I don't even know. Last year, the year that they were on quarantine for 3-4 months. Remote learning doesn't work for them. It's obvious. My son doesn't participate in remote learning. I emailed his teacher. I said, it doesn't work for us, quite simply. He had tantrums every day. He was crying. He was, at 5 years old, can a child be depressed? If he was, he stopped talking to his peers, and that's not a unique situation. But right now, we're back to the drawing board, and I feel panicky even talking about it. What are the next 2 weeks going to look like? Is he going to be brought back into school? Are his peers going to be brought back in? Is there no possible way to get these kids? How many kids in Oakland have an IEP? There's no way to get them back into the school. They're sitting at home. Their parents, like for example myself, I'm a special ed teacher. I have called out of work for the next 2 weeks. My principal has given me permission to teach my son. He has OT, PT, speech, teacher of the deaf. He doesn't do remote learning. It doesn't work for him. So I don't know if you can answer questions right now, but I would love to know if this goes beyond 2 weeks, what's the plan? Is there a plan within the next week to bring in the kids with IEPs so that we don't have to go through this again? Today I took my son swimming. Tomorrow I'm hiring a private occupational therapist to come to my house to work with him. The next day, a babysitter's coming to my house so I can go to work. The same thing the next day. He's not in isolation. He's being exposed. He's not in hiding. So my question is, what is the plan moving forward for these kids? Is 2 weeks the max? Can anybody answer that? Or is this not a public question and answer session right now? It's not. Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to express my appreciation to you all for dedicating your time and resources to our schools. I'm sure, like all of us in the community, you're especially feeling the weight of these trying times. And so I just want to, add my voice to those saying thank you for your work, and we do appreciate it. I also want to make sure.
Excuse me.
Yeah. My apologies. Yeah, Peter Mohan, 164 East Bettlewood in Oakland. I want to add my voice to those expressing concern that not all members of the communities who are negatively impacted by closures are being considered, namely working class families who don't have the resources to forego work in order to stay home with their children. I think the economic hardships of shutdowns have been disproportionately laid on the poor and working class, and I don't really hear or see their struggles reflected in the conversations surrounding our schools, especially in this community. We may not be the most diverse community in Camden County, but I do know that economically there is quite a disparate level of people's ability to bear stoppages of their work in order to take care of their children at home. So I just wanted to highlight that as something that we ought to be considering a little bit more when weighing whether or not to shut down schools. As I understand it, the shutdowns are due to both health reasons and staffing reasons, and I just want to make sure that everyone saw the report out of Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania's policy lab that recommended schools stay open. I'm not a scientist, but I do think that CHOP is one of the more highly regarded scientific resources that directly are representing our children in the area. And I'm surprised if they're saying that the recommendations from a health and science point of view are to keep kids in school. I don't know. I have to assume maybe it's the staffing issues that are tilting the scales towards shutting down. And if that is the case, knowing that we've had plenty of time to prepare for the contingencies of staffing and teachers being affected negatively, we can't help but wonder what has been put into place to account or to compensate for teachers and staff being out. I know that some other districts have increased substitute teacher pay, day pay, and guess what? You pay people more to come in and substitute teach. They come in. I don't know if that's been discussed, but if you pay people more, they work more. I just would like to hear more. I think the public wants to know more about what is being proffered as solutions to keep our kids in school. All right, I said a lot, but I do appreciate everyone's work, and I'm sure we'll pull through it together. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, I assume that's it because that's everybody that's in our audience tonight.
Can I ask a question, Bill?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I just have a quick question that I wanted to ask as well. So I'm just curious. Obviously, Collingswood and Oaklyn share many things, right? So superintendent, we've done a lot to align our calendars and our curriculum. And I'm just curious, and I don't know if you can answer this now, but there have been instances in the past where Oaklyn School might need to close and Collingswood doesn't. For instance, when we had like a water main break. And I'm curious if Oaklyn's staff numbers improved and Collingswood's didn't. If there's a scenario where Oaklyn would open and Collingswood didn't, or vice versa even, So.
Yes. So Oaklyn is a separate school district. So just for the record, I think that just for the public's knowledge, is that the precipice for the reason why we had to move into remote learning was a staffing challenge that we could not overcome. Collectively, we had over 80 individuals out for an extended period of time. I also want to provide some clarity in terms of the CDC. There's a lot of confusion. The way that the CDC launched their latest update has caused national confusion. So the CDC guidelines for isolation are for general population only. They do not affect K-12 schools or health facilities. The isolation period for the states across the country is still 10 to 14 days. 14 being the optimal recommendation, 10 days being the minimum standard for individuals who are COVID positive. So that has not changed. What I will say is that as two separate districts, the negative impact of staffing shortages was mutually dire. It would have been irresponsible to try to operate the schools with those level of shortages, specifically given the number of children that we have that do have special needs, the number of children that we do have that are very young and require specific levels of supervision. I will also say that from a community perspective, I would be checking your inbox probably midday tomorrow. We have been working around the clock to try to solve this issue. I will say that we will not be in remote through January 18th, and details will be outlined tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell.
Thanks, Dr. McDowell. A little bit of good news toward the end of the meeting. I can't talk when I'm holding my hand on here. We run a public education facility. You folks are all opposed to closing the school. There are a number of people out there who want to have remote learning because they're afraid that their kids are going to get sick if they send them into school. So just please be aware that we have to balance both sides. It's not just one side or the other side. We have to balance both. And on the question of substitute pay, we have increased substitute pay. Substitutes are just not. Okay, Dr. McDowell has been working on this nonstop. He has given us now a little bit of good news, so hopefully that will work out. But tomorrow's not going to be the day. I assume that things open, but we'll move forward in the future. So again, just please bear with us. We are working on it. These guys spend all day working on it and fielding the questions that come from the parents as well. So try and stay off of Facebook as much as you can, because the information you get from Facebook 9 times out of 10 is not accurate, and it just leads to more and more and more comments that are not productive. So, but thank you for coming out and telling us your opinions.
Bill, can I make a comment?
Sure.
I just want to say, I think,
Yes, you did.
there it goes. I think it, I don't want to see them in school in July. So I think that it's good news that we have coming, hopefully, but I don't think, I just don't want anybody to think that this was something that was taken lightly and that anybody was like, yeah, let's just close the school. You know, I just don't think that that's where the mindset is.
And I'm just going to add one more comment, just because you mentioned substitutes, and I feel like this is important for everyone in the public to understand, that we've, as a district, have been talking about a substitute teacher shortage for a few years before COVID. It's been an ongoing discussion. Now it's a question of bodies, really. It's a societal issue. It's not something that our district's going to be able to solve. There's, if anyone is out there that is willing to substitute, I know the school would love to talk to you. It's just been one of those things that COVID has made it worse, but it's been an issue for years. I remember Dr. Oswald, one of my first board meetings, one of our committee meetings, he mentioned it, and it's been something that's been continually discussed for a long time. So the staffing, it's a real challenge to get people in the building. So I just wanted to say that as well. Thank you for your comments and for coming tonight.
Yeah, just one more thing too. I read Oakland Family News. I don't comment on it, but one of the comments I saw was, why not just extend the school year into July? The answer is we can't. We have to have 100. I had my hand on the button, honest. Just is not feasible. Just for everyone's information. I hate this thing. Okay. Anybody have anything else to bring to the board? How about the board members? Any questions, complaints? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, madam.
You really going to have everybody back in before the 18th?
Thank you.